Thank you, Mr. Hutton. Ms. Bright, you may call your first witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. People call Josh Ozog.
Do you solemnly state that the evidence you shall give in this matter is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Thank you. Please be seated at the witness stand. Please state your full name and spell your first and last name for the record.
My full name is Stosh Timothy Ozog. First name is spelled S-T-O-S-H, last name O-Z-O-G.
Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Ozog.
Good morning.
Mr. Ozog, where do you work?
Right now I work at the Scripps Research Institute, but previously I was a medical student at UCSD, and I will be a medical student again in a year.
What do you do at Scripps Institute?
I'm a graduate student. I do HIV vaccine research.
You mentioned that you were a medical student at UCSD, is that right?
Yes, yeah, still on.
How long is that program?
The two programs together are combined about 8 years.
And when you say two programs, what do you mean by that?
So my program is a double MD PhD degree. So I did the first 2 years of medical school and then start research for 4 years and then go back to medical school at the end of after I finish my PhD.
When do you finish your PhD?
Hopefully next year.
Then you go back to medical school to finish becoming a doctor.
Yes.
So you'll be a doctor.
Yes.
I'd like to take you back to May the 15th of 2015. You, at that time, where were you going to school?
At that time I had just finished my second year of medical school at UCSD.
And was there anything special about the 15th of May 2015 regarding your schooling?
Yes, so the first 2 years of medical school are very class intensive, so all of the students in a year will be spending most of their time together taking classes. And then typically the students will stop and take the first step of the medical boards, which is a very large test that's very important for our kind of future careers. And school is usually, we're given a dedicated time to study for it, which we're not seeing our fellow students. And then we all take the test, and then once that's over, we go into third year of medical school, which is very different. It's spent doing clinical rotations, and we're not typically with each other in that same time. So around the date of the accident, it was the end of a period of about a week where we're kind of, it's a last hurrah of class before we go off and start doing clinical rotations. So most of us were gathering to kind of celebrate that, and the completion of our board exams as well.
Are you familiar with someone by the name of Annalie Baldock?
Yes, she was a very good friend.
How long had you known Annalie Baldock?
Since she and I started in the program at the same time, so I'd known her at that point about 2 years.
If I was to show you a picture of Ms. Baldock, do you think you'd recognize her?
Of course.
Commissioner Prochor?
Of course. Feel free to come and go as you want.
Thank you. Mr. Ozog, I'm showing you two exhibits marked as number 1 and number 2. But yes. Do you recognize those two photographs?
Yes, of course.
Commissioner Publisher?
Any objection?
Nope.
1 and 2 are received and may be published.
Can I look?
On the screen there is marked as exhibit number 1. Is that the same as what's in front of you on paper marked as exhibit 1?
Yeah.
Who is that?
That's Andy. That's Annalie Baldock.
And that was someone that you knew from medical school, is that right?
Yes, we were very close friends.
And regarding exhibit number 2,
That's Madison Cornwall.
how did you know Madison Cornwall?
We were also very good friends. She was also in my same year in medical school.
When you say they were in the same year, did you all start at the same time?
Yeah, we all started at the same time.
I'd like to take you back to the night of the 15th of May, 2015.
Mhm.
Where were you, or where did you start your night?
I started my night having dinner with Annie and Yuki, as well as with our friend Anupam. It was at Annie's house up in the graduate student housing area near UCSD.
And who is Anupam?
Anupam Garg is another friend of ours who's also in our MD PhD program. He started with us in the same area.
So the evening started with you, Miss Cornwell,
With Annie, Miss Baldock, yeah.
you, Miss Baldock,
Mhm.
Yuki,
And
Izuka, and
Mhm.
Anupam.
Anupam Garg, yeah.
Now, when you started the evening, were you having dinner or drinks?
Yeah, we were having dinner.
Where were you having dinner?
It was in Annie's apartment.
And how close does Miss Baldock live to where you ended up going that evening? We all kind of lived in the same area. It's a graduate student housing area that's up near the UCSD campus in La Jolla, and then we ended up going to a party later in the night that was down in Hillcrest, so 20 minutes or so. When you had dinner at Miss Baldock's, when you left her place, how did you get from Miss Baldock's to where you went to a house party?
I believe that we drove in Anupam's car, because we stopped over at Anupam's house to park. His house is close to where the party was, so we all drove together down there in his car, yeah, as far as I remember.
What time did you get to the house party?
I think we got to the house party around maybe 10 o'clock, 10 p.m.
When you got to the house party, who all were you with?
So at that point we had transferred into, Madison was at Anupam's house, so we transferred into Madison's car at that point, and then drove that car over to where the house party was.
Who was driving?
Madison.
When you left then Anupam's house, who all was in Madison Cornwell's car?
I believe at that point it was Annie, Yuki, Anupam, and myself, and Madison was driving.
When you got to the
Excuse me.
when you got to the house party,
Mhm.
whose house party was it?
It was a party being thrown by a number of our friends. I think it was mostly being thrown by our friend Bradford. So the house that he lived in was a house that has kind of been passed down through successive renters who are medical school students. So several medical students lived there, but I think the party was being thrown by Bradford, who was our class president, or he wasn't at the time, and he ended up being by the end.
When you were at that party, you got there around 10 o'clock in the evening?
Yeah, about 10 o'clock.
Be mindful that there's a court reporter taking down everything you're saying, so even though you may understand what my question's going to be, just wait till I finish asking it, otherwise I think you should start throwing things. You mentioned that you got there about 10 o'clock. Throughout the evening, at any point in time, did you see Madison Cornwell have anything alcoholic to drink?
No.
And you made a decision before you got to Bradford's house who was going to be the designated driver.
Yes, it was going to be Madison.
How long would you say that you stayed at Bradford's house?
I think about 3 hours or so.
When you left and when you were there, is it fair to say it was a party?
Yes,
Did you have anything alcoholic to drink that night?
I did, yes.
Did your other friends, with the exception of Miss Cornwell?
Yes.
If you stayed around 3 hours, about 1 o'clock, is it fair to say at that point in time you left?
Mm-hmm.
Is that a yes?
That is, yes.
When you left, who was driving?
Madison.
Where did you go when you left Bradford's house?
We went to drop off Anupam at his house, which is on Mississippi Street in kind of the Hillcrest area. And then once we dropped him off, we left to head back up to UCSD in that direction.
After you dropped Anupam off, who was in the vehicle?
At that point, it was Madison driving, and Jared Molatoris, who was we picked him up at the party. He came back with us because he lives in that part of the city. He was in the front passenger side, and then I was in the back passenger seat. Yuki was next to me in the middle, and Annie was in the back on the left.
You mentioned that you were then driving to go back to your residences in La Jolla area. What route did you take?
So we left from Anupam's house, taking Mississippi Street onto El Cajon,
And then once we got into El Cajon, we got to the intersection of Park and Normal Street and turned onto Normal, and then went onto Washington, and then entered the 163 heading north on Washington.
If I was to show you an overhead map, do you think you would recognize that?
Yeah.
Is that yes?
Yes.
I'm showing you what's marked as exhibit number 4. Do you recognize that Google map?
Yes.
What do you recognize that as?
It looks like the intersection of the 163 and the 8, as well as the 805, a couple other freeways.
Commissioner Publisher?
No, you may publish, and 4 is received. I'm going to assume, sir, that you have no objection. If you want to pose one, just let me know.
That's fine, I'm not going to have any objections. So.
Okay.
Mr. O's, I'm looking at exhibit number 4. You mentioned that you came off the 163 where the 8 is. The area that we see at the very bottom of the map that we're looking at has certain kind of markings. It's got UCSD Medical Center, Hillcrest. It has Maryland Street, Townhomes, University Heights. Is it fair to say that at the bottom left hand of exhibit number 4, in the area where we see UCSD Medical Center, and I think it says Uptown District, was that the area where the party was located that night?
The party was located around kind of where the Maryland Street Townhomes area says on the map.
And that's to the right of the street marked as 163 at the very bottom of exhibit number 4, is that right?
Correct, yes.
And is it fair to say that from the Maryland Street Townhomes, that's where you worked your way onto the freeway, almost at the very bottom of exhibit number 4?
Yeah, that was the freeway entrance that we took off of Washington Street onto the 163.
Once you got onto the 163, what do you remember?
I think the last thing I remember, I was looking at my phone because I was in the back seat, and I briefly remember us accelerating to get onto the 163, and then I completely blank at that point.
What's the next thing that you remember?
The next thing I remember is a very fuzzy memory of being, I believe, in a bystander's car. I think I was pulled out of the accident. I briefly remember being in either the trunk or the back seat of their car, but I don't have any memory of who those people were. And then I pretty much remember waking up in the emergency room and being in a lot of pain.
What hospital were you at?
I was at Scripps. Yeah.
And when you say you were in a lot of pain, where were you in pain?
Right in the middle of my back. I can describe it more if you need.
Recognizing that you have some medical training, when you say that you had a sharp pain, did you have treatment for that pain at the hospital?
At the hospital, yes.
What was the nature of your injuries?
I had fractured my spine in 3 places. I had additional injuries. I had broken 2 ribs. I had a collapsed lung where the ribs were broken. I'd also had a pretty major concussion, a large bruise on my face, and a number of other smaller injuries, and also a pretty deep puncture wound.
Where was the puncture wound?
In my butt, on my butt.
Now, you mentioned that your spine was fractured in 3 places. What sort of treatment did you have in order to fix that or correct that?
Yeah, for that I was in a back brace for approximately, I think maybe 4 months or so, and then after that I had physical therapy for a while after that.
Do you have any lingering effects from the injuries that you had as a result of the crash?
Yeah, I still typically have back pain on most days.
Were there any ramifications to your educational progress as a result of this crash?
I would say that it probably delayed my entrance into graduate school, or my progress in graduate school for maybe 3 or 4 months. And there was a rotation that I was supposed to start for medical school that I wasn't able to start at that point as well.
Are you going to be able to make that up when you go back to medical school?
I think so.
Besides when you woke up or when you became aware of yourself on the freeway in someone's vehicle, do you remember how you got from that vehicle to Scripps Mercy?
I think I know now, secondarily, that I was taken in an ambulance, but I have no memory of the ambulance, really.
You mentioned that you also had a very large bruise. Where was that?
I think it was sort of on my forehead up here.
On the left-hand side where you were
Yeah.
gesturing?
Mm-hmm.
Is that yes?
Yes, I think so. Yeah.
I have no further questions for this witness.
Okay, Mr. Hutton?
Yeah, we have no questions for this witness.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Herzog. We'll excuse you at this time. You may call your next witness.
Thank you. People call Jared Militaris.
Do you solemnly state that the evidence you shall give in this matter is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Thank you. Please be seated as witness do. Please state your full name and spell your first and last name for the record.
Jared Molitoris, Jared Molitoris.
Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Militaris.
Good morning.
Mr. Militaris, where do you work?
I'm currently a third-year medical student at UCSD on a psychiatry rotation at the Naval Balboa Hospital.
You say that you're a third-year medical student. Does that mean all of your classes are completed, or how does that work?
We have classes in a classroom typically for the first 2 years and more clinical exposure for the third and fourth year. So the majority of the classwork is done, and now I'm in the hospital seeing more patients.
I'd like to take you back to the 15th of May of 2015. Do you remember that night?
Pieces of it, yes.
Before we get to that evening, were you in med school at that time?
I completed the orientation week to the third year, and I was going to go out with my friends that night.
And which friends were you going out with?
It was a number of the students from our class, and in that group were the people in our car. So Stash was there, Nupum was there, Madison was there, Annie was there, and Yuki were all there, plus some other friends like Nilu and other people as well.
How did you start your evening that night?
I don't recall the details before going to the house party.
When you went to the house party, where were you coming from?
I don't remember.
When you got to the house party, whose house party was it?
I don't remember.
When you were at the house party, what time do you think you got there?
Probably around 9 o'clock, but I'm really not sure.
When you were at the party, did you have anything alcoholic to drink that night?
Yes.
And were you driving that evening? When you were at the party, how long did you stay there?
I believe we left somewhere around 1. I'm not too sure, but I would have been there for at least a few hours.
And then when you left the party, who did you leave with?
The same people I mentioned, so Madison, Stash, Yuki, Annie, Anubam, and myself.
When you left the party, who was driving?
Madison.
When you were at the party, do you remember at any point in time whether or not Miss Cornwell had anything alcoholic to drink?
I never saw her have anything to drink, and I remember that she told me, or she told one of my friends that was standing next to me, that she was a sober driver for that night.
When you left the party, Madison was driving, where were you seated in her vehicle?
I was the front passenger seat.
Do you remember being in the car that evening? Said yes?
Yes.
After you left the party, what's the next thing that you remember?
So I sort of have pictures in my mind. So I remember leaving the party with that group. I remember being in that front passenger seat. I remember dropping and Newcomb off at a place very close to where the party was. I'm not exactly sure where. I remember being at an intersection. I think it's El Cajon Boulevard where it turns into Normal, and then Washington Street. At sort of a strange intersection. There was some comment made that we're turning onto Normal, but it's not a normal intersection. I remember that. Very soon after that, we were on the on-ramp to the 163. I remember that. I remember glancing at my phone, sort of the final check that we'd gotten away from Hillcrest. I was navigating. We were getting onto the 163. Everyone knew how to get back to the north part of San Diego where our dorms are from there, so I could turn off my phone. I remember seeing headlights.
Let me stop you there.
Sure.
You mentioned that you were navigating. Is that right?
Correct.
Were you using some sort of an application on your phone to do that?
Google Maps.
And once you kind of wound your way through the Hillcrest area and you got onto 163, you didn't need to use that anymore. Is that right?
Correct.
Now, when you were on the 163, if I showed you a portion of the 163, do you think you would recognize it?
Vaguely. I actually drove from the Naval Hospital yesterday back on the same route, 163 to the 805 back to my place, and sort of re-looked at everything. I mean, there's a vague memory there, but I can't tell you details of exactly where we were.
Show you a picture. Let me show you an exhibit marked as exhibit number 5. Do you recognize that at all?
I believe I recognize that from a photograph that I saw afterwards that included both of the vehicles from a press report, but I don't recall that specifically from the night when I was blacked out.
Do you recognize that area at all, or that street?
Yeah.
What is that street?
I believe it's the 163, and it's right where the I-8 crosses it.
And is that going northbound?
I believe so.
Commissioner Publisher?
I have no objection.
You may publish, and 5 is received.
Mr. Molitor says what's on the screen there marked as exhibit number 5, is that the same as what's in the binders marked as 5?
Yes.
As you got onto the 163, do you remember which lane Ms. Cornwell's vehicle was in?
I'm not positive, but I'm assuming it's the very rightmost lane because everything happened so fast that we wouldn't have had much time to get into a lane, the middle lane or the leftmost lane. And it's at a time when there wouldn't be many cars on the road, and I don't remember seeing many cars, so I don't see why we would move over.
When you got onto the on-ramp right before you got onto the 163, is it fair to say that the on-ramp is very close to where we are located in the photograph marked as number 5?
Yes.
And when you were in the vehicle, got onto the on-ramp, what's the next thing that you remember?
Basically just seeing headlights.
Could you describe the headlights that you saw?
They looked big to me. I wouldn't know if it was an SUV or a pickup truck or even potentially a semi-truck. It just looked like very large headlights, and it happened very fast. And I remember the bright lights getting brighter and then just sort of blacking out and not remembering much after that.
Did you have the opportunity to scream or tell anyone in the car what you saw?
I don't believe so. I think it happened so fast that I didn't. The only sensation that I have as a memory that I believe came afterwards when I was in the hospital is I felt like I tensed up, bracing for impact.
At this point in time, did you put your phone away?
I did not.
You mentioned that you remember bracing for impact in the hospital, is that fair?
Right.
Now, do you remember anything about the crash itself?
Again, afterwards when I was in the hospital, the reason I say I don't think I put my phone away is because my injury was a fractured sternum, and the only way I can come up with that would have happened is I was holding my phone and the airbag would push my phone into my chest. But that's sort of a supposition. It's not an exact memory from that night because of the blackout.
After you remember the headlights, what is the next clear memory that you have?
Waking up in a hospital with a CT, scanning my head and talking with a police officer.
Which hospital did you go to?
Would have been Hillcrest, UCSD at Hillcrest.
You mentioned that as a result of the crash, you had a fractured sternum, is that right? Is that a yes?
Yes.
And your sternum, is that one of the bones kind of in your...
Yeah, it connects the rib cage in the middle.
What was the treatment for the fractured sternum?
It was being very cautious and trying not to aggravate anything. I guess previously medical treatment was to wrap the whole torso, but they've learned that over time that actually slows the healing process. So for me it was trying not to use my arms at all until it healed over the course of probably 8 weeks.
Did you have any injuries internally at all?
I don't believe so.
Did you have any other bruises or scrapes on your body?
The only other thing was I had a sprained thumb that I still feel is aggravated.
Even 2.5 years later? Do you have any lingering effects from the fractured sternum?
Only that I can feel that the bone is not the way it used to be, but it doesn't prevent my functioning.
And besides remembering waking up in the CT room, do you remember anything about being on the side of the freeway after the crash itself?
I have a vague memory, which I'm not sure is a true memory, but I believe I had my arm around someone, maybe they were assisting me into their car to get me to the hospital, and I turned to look back and saw kind of rubble of what used to be a car. But I don't know if that's a dream, a made-up memory, or an actual memory because of the blackout.
How long were you blacked out? Do you have any idea?
My guess is 2 hours. That is an approximation.
Were you diagnosed with any sort of concussion because of the blackout?
Later, I had a workup with a learning specialist, and they had a diagnosis of post-concussive syndrome.
What does that mean?
Not entirely sure.
Did you have any impact on your classes at UCSD as a result of this crash?
Yes.
What was the impact?
So at the time, that was May of 2015. We had finished our orientation to our third year of medical school, and I was supposed to start the third year of medical school. That should last until the following May. Here it's 2018, and I'm still trying to slowly go through my third year of medical school. So I've been delayed approximately 2 years.
Why is that?
After the accident, I was having some trouble with USMLE Step 1 National Boards examination, and took it before or after the accident, but at some point I did take it. I've taken that exam 3 times. The first 2 times I failed it, and I recently passed it. I believe the first time I took it, failed it, was before the accident. The second time I took it, failed it, was after the accident, and more recently I passed it. But because of that delay and those failures, my primary care physician asked me to see a learning specialist and do a neurocognitive assessment to look for any of array of different issues that could be causing my delay in school. And they came up with 4 diagnoses. I have them in a paper in my pocket. I could read them to you. But the gist of it is that I was diagnosed with post-concussive syndrome and a learning disability focused on reading rate and I believe free auditory recall.
Do you remember having any of these issues before the crash?
Yes, I feel like I've always sort of had some minor issues with this, but I believe the crash and some time pressure, academic pressure, has sort of made it very difficult for me to continue at the pace people had seen me at before.
Do you remember in the crash whether or not at any point in time you hit your head?
I don't remember.
I have no further questions for this.
Cross?
No, we have no questions for this witness. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Molontaros, thank you for coming in, so good exclusion. Let's take a short break, folks. We'll be in recess until 10 till 11. 10 till 11. Okay, all jurors are again present together with counsel. Ms. Bright, you may call your next
Do you solemnly state that the evidence you shall give in this matter is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes.
Thank you. Please be seated at witness stand. Please state your full name and spell your first and last name for the record.
Full name is Anupam Kumar Garg, and first name is spelled Anupam, and last name is spelled Garg.
Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Garg.
Good morning.
Mr. Garg, where do you work?
I work at the Salk Institute in La Jolla, and I'm a graduate student at UCSD.
What do you do at the Salk Institute?
I'm a PhD student, so I'm in the neuroscience graduate program, studying the brain in a lab at the Salk Institute.
You're a PhD student in neuroscience, is that correct?
Yes.
Are you also in medical school?
Yes, so I'm in the combined MD PhD program at UCSD.
What year are you in your programs?
I'm currently in the 5th year of the entire program, so I've completed 2 years of medical school, and I'm in the 3rd year of the PhD.
And how many years is the PhD program before you go back to the medical school?
I have another 1.5 to 2 years remaining, and then 2 years of medical school remaining after that.
When did you start your PhD, your MD PhD program?
I started the program in the fall of 2013.
When you started your program, were you classmates with Madison Cornwell and Anne Lee Baldock?
Yes.
I'd like to take you back to May the 15th of 2015. Do you remember that evening?
Yes.
Where did you start that evening?
So I started that evening at the apartment of Annie Baldock.
And who were you with?
So I was with Annie as well as the other MD PhD students in our class, and Yuki as well.
When you say there was the other MD PhD students, how many people are in that dual degree program?
So we had 6 people enter our program in our year.
There was yourself. Who were the other ones?
So Stash Ozog, Annie Baldock, Geraldine Gobrecht, and Jennifer Dumby and Liam King.
So of the group of you that were, I guess, hanging out that night at Ms. Baldock's house, yourself and Stosh were 2 of the ones in the joint program. Is that right?
Yes.
How long would you say you were at Ms. Baldock's house?
Approximately 7:30 p.m. till 10 p.m.
Where did you go at 10 p.m.?
So at 10 p.m., we drove down to my house, my apartment in North Park, where we met Madison Cornwell. After that, we all drove together to another classmate, Bradford Wynn's house.
When you left Ms. Baldock's place, who was driving?
I was driving.
When you got to your house, you say that you met up with Madison Cornwell. Is that right?
Yes.
When you got to your apartment where you lived, did you park your car at that point in time?
Yes, I parked there.
Who then drove from your house to your next party?
Madison Cornwell drove us to the next party.
And the next party you mentioned, it was at what friend's house?
His name is Bradford Wynn, one of our medical school classmates.
Last name is Wynn?
Wynn, yeah, Nguyen.
What time did you get to Bradford Wynn's party?
I would say approximately 11 p.m.
How close is it from your house to Bradford Wynn's house?
Probably 5 to 10 minutes driving at most.
When you got to the party at Bradford Wynn's house, did you have alcoholic beverages to drink that night?
Did I?
Did you?
Yes.
How long would you say that you stayed at that party?
Probably till around approximately 1 to 1:20 a.m. on the morning of the 16th.
And during the time that you were at the party, did you spend much time with Madison Cornwell?
Yes.
How much time would you say that you spent with Ms. Cornwell?
At least half of the time I was there.
At any point in time, did you see her have anything alcoholic to drink?
No.
When you left the party, who all left with you?
So when we left the party, it was myself, Stash Ozog. We also drove Jared Molatoris, and Madison Cornwell was driving, Annie Baldock, and Yuki Izuka.
And when they left the party at Bradford's house, did they then take you to your place?
Yes, they dropped me off.
And when they dropped you off at that point in time, did you have any further communication with that group that evening?
No.
When you were at the party, you mentioned that you didn't see Ms. Cornwell have anything alcoholic to drink. Did you have anything to drink when you met her at your house earlier that evening either?
Sorry, can you repeat that?
Sure, it's a terrible question. When you left Ms. Baldock's house and you went to your place, that's where you first met up with Ms. Cornwell, is that right?
Yes.
And when you were at your place dropping off your vehicle, did anyone come in at that point in time and have beverages at your house?
No, I don't believe so.
Through the entire course of the evening, how much time would you say that you spent with Ms. Cornwell?
2 hours.
And in that entire 2 hours that you spent with her, at any point in time, did you see her have anything alcoholic to drink?
No.
I have no further questions for this witness. Mr. Hood.
We have no questions.
All right, thank you.
Raise your right hand. Do you solemnly state that the evidence you shall give in this matter is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes.
Thank you. Please be seated at the witness stand. Please state your full name and spell your first and last name for the record.
My name is Yuki Eric Izuka, spelled Y-U-K-I. Last name is Iizuka.
Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Izuka.
Good morning.
Mr. Izuka, where do you work and go to school?
I am currently working at Scripps Mercy, and I go to school at UCSD.
What do you do at Scripps Mercy?
I am currently a medical student, and so I am helping out the team with patients there.
You also mentioned that at UCSD you're a medical student, is that correct?
Yes,
What year of medical school are you in?
I'm currently a third year.
So in your third year, is it fair to say that you're doing like a practicum rotation?
Say that again?
Because you're in your third year, are you doing like a rotation in hospitals, is that fair to say?
Yes.
Mr. Izuka, you've had some medical issues in the last 2.5 years, is that fair to say?
Yes.
Do you remember anything about the night of May the 15th, 2015?
No.
What is the first memory that you have after that date?
The first memory, I guess I would say the first memory that I have would be being at the rehabilitation center and being lost and frustrated about the fact that I didn't know where my room was.
Now, since that memory of the rehabilitation center, is it fair to say that you've had memories, or you've been able to research kind of what happened to you from the night of May the 15th of 2015?
Wait, so what was the question? I'm not exactly sure.
Since the night of May the 15th, or into the early morning hours of May the 16th,
Mhm.
2015, is it fair to say that you've had the opportunity to go back and kind of piece together what happened
Yes.
before your first memory at the rehabilitation center?
Yes.
And how did you go about piecing that all together?
I spoke with family and friends to find out exactly what happened.
And did you learn, in speaking with people, that you stayed in a hospital?
Did I learn from the people that were in the hospital at the time?
Did you, at some point in time, did you learn that you'd had to stay in a hospital because of some injuries that you had?
Yes.
Do you know how long that you were there?
So I think I was specifically in the hospital for 1 month
What hospital were you in?
at UCSD.
And after you were at the UCSD hospital, where did you go to next?
I think I went to the rehabilitation center.
How long were you at the rehabilitation center?
I think it's approximately around 1 month.
Where did you go after that?
I believe that I went back home to my parents' house.
After your first memory of the rehabilitation center feeling lost, what's the next thing that you remember?
I guess the notable memory that I do have would be the sense of relief and joy of being able to see my room at my house, at my parents' house, would be the notable thing that sticks in my mind at this moment in time.
When you remember being in your room or seeing in your room, did the memories from there get a little bit clearer for you?
It certainly has gotten much clearer than those back in those days. But that being said, I do think that there's also, my memory just in general was very patchy at the time, so there may be some portions that seem much more clear to me than other portions that are completely deleted out of my mind.
Is it fair to say that you learned that you were in a car crash?
Yes.
Did you also have treatment for injuries from that car crash?
Yes, plenty.
What were the injuries that you had?
The injuries that I had a multitude of injuries. So the notable injury would be that my thigh bone, my femur, was snapped in half, and so they had to replace that. And then my hand, as you can see from my scars, that they are my hand was very debilitated, and they had to do surgeries for that to make sure that I still have a hand. Fortunately, I do have a hand. And then the other thing would be, I guess medically speaking, it's called homonymous hemianopia. But that being said,
I'm gonna stop you there for a second. So, whenever you use any medical terms, you have the joy of spelling them for us so that the court reporter gets it right. So you used the term, it began with an H. Could you spell that for us, if you could?
or I can just tell you exactly what it means. But either way, spelling homonymous hemianopia is HOMONYMOUS, and hemianopia is HEMINOPIA, and some people include hemianopsia or anopia. They're the synonyms, so it doesn't matter. So regardless, what does it all mean, right? So basically, that just means the fact that in both my eyes, I cannot see the left side of the world.
And was that injury as a result from a car crash?
Most certainly.
And how did that injury manifest itself? Was there an injury to your head or something like that? How did
Yes.
that come about?
So the other thing that I was going to follow up with is the fact that I had a traumatic brain injury, and that is the main reason why I have the homonymous hemianopia.
And so the traumatic brain injury, did you actually fracture your skull or
So,
what was it?
I think that there were some fractures, and they had to readjust my eyes because I had some ocular abnormalities, and I had to do some surgeries for that as well. And so I definitely had some injuries with that. I don't know if there's any notable, I can't recall exactly, what kind of fracture there was specifically, but I do know that my brain was significantly injured from the accident.
When you wash your hair, do you have any scars on your skull that you're not
Yes.
familiar with?
I do have scars on my skull, and granted, that being said, they might not be the most visible right now, but if you look in closer, it's definitely there.
And the scars that you had, were those a result of the crash, or did you have to have surgery to repair some of the damage?
I think they were from the crash, and then, so they were from the crash.
Now, when you were in hospital, is it fair to say that you have no recollection of that month that you were at UCSD?
Completely zero. Either way, I was comatose for I think around 2 weeks, so I would not have any recollection even if I wanted to. And then I was recovering from my comatose state, and I'm not going to have the cognitive ability to be able to remember anything at that moment in time either.
You mentioned also that there was some ocular damage, is that right?
Yes.
Did you have a broken orbital socket at all?
I think they had said something about that, and I had to get some surgeries to basically adjust for that. But I'm not entirely sure exactly the details behind how the ocular surgeries, I think they had said something about how my eyes were misaligned, and so I had to get some surgery for that.
And was all of that happening in that 1 month that you were at the hospital?
I don't think so, but I think some of the surgeries, like the ocular misalignment one, may have been a little later. I can't recall exactly when it was, but yeah. But it should have been after being in the hospital comatose.
So, after the time spent in the hospital, then you go to the rehabilitation center, then you get home. Have you had any surgeries since the time that you were actually released from the rehabilitation center?
So again, this is because of the fact that I have terrible memory around that time, just in general. But I thought that I had some procedures done for the ocular misalignment, and hand surgeries, I think, were a little bit later after being discharged, but I don't know exactly when.
So when you were talking about your hand, you were holding up your left hand, is that right?
Yes.
And your left hand has some scars on it, is that fair to say?
Yes.
I'm sorry, sir, could you show me that? Thank you.
And the scars on your hand, you didn't have those before the night of May the 15th,
That is definitely true.
And do you remember having surgery on your hand or no?
So I guess I can't remember exact details behind the surgery. Yeah, sorry.
And do you remember your hand ever having to be in a cast or having pins in it or anything like that?
I definitely don't remember, I guess, like notable casts, but I do remember the fact that I had to do a lot of physical therapy for it.
So at some point in time, your hand got well enough that you actually had to then go and have physical therapy to get use of your hand. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
Now, what kind of use do you now have in your left hand?
So, what kind of use do I have in my left hand? In general, I mean, I can use it for daily activities of daily living, I guess you could say. So in that sense, I can definitely do whatever is necessary. But that being said, there are some particular things that I'm not able to do with my left hand. And so I'm sure you would like to get an example of that just in general. And so it's, for example, right now I am making a fist right now, but it's not a completely closed fist.
Would it be fair to say that like tiny little things like putting in a contact or something might be something that might you have difficulty with in your left hand?
I'm not entirely certain because of the fact that I never use my left hand to put my contacts in, and I'm right hand dominant regardless. And so I'm not entirely sure about that, just in general, if I could do it even if my hand was completely normal. But that being said, notable things that I can't do aside from that would be the fact that I used to play a lot of bass guitar. And obviously when playing any kind of instrument like a bass guitar, you need both of your hands to be able to actually play a musical instrument like that. And just holding down the fretboard of the bass guitar with my left hand is tremendously difficult and weak and painful.
So 2.5 years later, there's still pain in your left hand.
That is definitely true.
You also mentioned that you had a fracture or an injury to your femur. Is that right?
Yes.
Did you have to have some sort of medical treatment for your femur fracture?
So they had to do surgery for my femur. And they replaced half my femur with a titanium rod.
Was that one of the surgeries that happened when you were still at UCSD?
I think so. I followed up with the orthopedic surgeon that did the surgery for that as well.
And as a result of that injury, did you also have to go through physical therapy?
Yes.
And was that physical therapy in order to get the strength back in your leg? Is that fair to say?
Yes, it's definitely true that I definitely had to get strength back to be able to use my legs properly, use my leg properly again. But that being said, I definitely do still have associated problems with my left leg even right now.
What kind of issues?
So notably, it would be pain, in the sense that when would it be painful? The notable thing would be if I were to be going up or down, going downstairs. Upstairs is generally fine, but going downstairs is painful, and running is always painful.
You're able to run on your leg with the half of it being titanium?
I'm capable of running as long as I'm willing to tolerate the pain. So if necessary, I can run, but I'm not going to with the pain.
And is the pain that you have in your leg, is that still something that you have to get treatment for or additional therapy or anything like that?
No.
You mentioned that you have a traumatic brain injury, is that right?
Right.
What is the nature of your injury besides the I'm going to say this, Homie, no, not. Can I call it HH for short?
Sure.
Besides the injury that affects your vision, what other impact has this traumatic brain injury had on you?
Specifically, cognition. And to give you a little bit more detail, specifically, being able to remember, and memory is definitely a very significant component that has been injured. And so that being said, obviously I am in medical school and the amount of information that I need to learn is going to be a very large amount. And so that is definitely significantly more challenging since the accident.
You have problems remembering things, is that fair?
Yes.
Just to, not to simplify it in a disrespectful way, but if we're boiling it down to what impact this crash had on your world.
Memory is definitely a significant portion.
And is there anything that you're going to be able to do to get that back?
I don't think so.
Now, when you were from UCSD to the rehabilitation center to home, when you got home, were you ambulatory, were you able to move around, or what were things like when you first got home?
When I first got home, I think, yeah, I was ambulatory.
You were?
Yeah.
Did you have to move around with crutches or anything because of the injury to your femur?
I don't think so. I can't remember exactly though.
So this crash happened on May the 15th, in the early morning hours of May the 16th, 2015.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know when you started physical therapy?
When I started physical therapy, I thought I had started, starting at the rehabilitation center was when I started, and then I definitely continued outpatient physical therapy for at least a year, I think.
And are you still having to undergo any sort of treatment or physical therapy for, let's say, your hand injury?
So when it comes to my hand and my thigh, femur injury, I'm not going through any kind of physical therapy at this moment in time.
What about for your HH? Is there any sort of treatment or therapy for that?
So that is definitely one of the things that I'm doing right now is working with a neuro-optometrist, and she is changing my lens specifically every approximately 3 months to see if she can progressively increase my range of vision.
How long will you have to continue to do that?
I'm not certain.
And what about for your traumatic brain injury? Is there anything that you can do or that you're working on to increase your memory or to deal with the injury that you suffered?
I don't think that there's any notable medical treatments that I'm taking or anything like that to improve my traumatic brain injury. Ultimately, to actually be able to improve it, I basically am going back through medical school, and the struggles of going through education just in general, I think is the most beneficial to help be able to improve my cognition as much as possible. I hope I'm right about that. I'm not entirely certain though.
Before the crash, you'd gone through your first 2 years of medical school, is that correct?
Yes.
When did you actually get to apply or start to go back to medical school?
So specifically, so again, the accident happened in 2015 of May, and so I attempted to try to go back to medical school the May of 2016 first, and then I went through 3 months of the third year and had to quit at that moment in time because I wasn't able to tolerate it cognitively and physically, and so then I came back again on the May of 2017 to start back up again, and here I am right now. and I've continued through medical school at least since May of 2017.
I have no further questions, Mr. Witness.
Cross?
Thank you, Your Honor, I have no questions.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Izuka. We'll excuse you at this time, sir.
Okay.
And you may call your next witness.
We will call Julie Mypack.
Do you solemnly state that the evidence you shall give in this matter is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Thank you. Please be seated at the stand. Please state your full name and spell your first and last name for the record.
Julie Mai, Juliemai.
Thank you.
Good morning, Ms. Mai.
Hello.
Ms. Mai, where do you work?
Currently, I own a small business in Mira Mesa.
What kind of business?
It is a beauty salon
How long have you owned that business?
for about 5 months now.
Are you familiar with the area around the State Route 163 and Interstate 8?
I am.
How are you familiar with that area?
At the time, I was working downtown in the Gaslamp District.
What were you doing? in Gaslamp?
I was a go-go dancer at a nightclub.
What?
A go-go dancer at a nightclub.
Did you travel the 163 often?
Every weekend.
What was your shift when you were working?
Start at 11 and my end time would be around 1:30.
When you got off work, which route would you take to go home?
163 North.
And when you were working at the restaurant bar type of thing?
Nightclub.
Nightclub? Excuse me. When you were working at the nightclub, would you have anything alcoholic to drink during your shifts?
No, ma'am.
I'd like to take you back to the early morning hours of May the 16th of 2015. Were you driving on the 163 that early morning?
Yes.
Do you remember that early morning?
Yes.
How do you remember it?
I was driving home and from work, and it was a very open freeway, obviously, at that time. Driving on the far left lane, being the fast lane, and I just, for a quick second, I saw something come at me, and then it wasn't until that I had swerved out of the way that I realized that a truck was driving on the opposite side of the freeway.
You mentioned something was coming at you. What did you see, or what did you recognize it to be?
I saw headlights and I didn't realize what it was until I had saw hazards, blinking lights.
And when you were traveling in the left-hand lane of the freeway, where were you when you first saw this truck in relationship to the, let's say, to the I-8?
I was already far from the I-8.
What area were you in?
I would probably say almost Claremont area, right before Genesee.
If I was to show you an overhead Google map of the 163, do you think you'd recognize that area?
Yes.
I'm showing you an exhibit marked as number 4. Do you recognize that area?
Some parts of it, yes.
We've got the same exhibit on the screen there to your right-hand side. You mentioned that you were farther north from the I-8. Is it fair to say that in this overhead map, the I-8 is the far southernmost, I guess, pink-colored freeway that we see in this exhibit that runs from the left-hand side of the photograph to the right-hand side of the photograph? Is that fair?
Yes.
And when you said that you had gone past the I-8, you were farther north from the I-8, how far had you gotten when you first saw this truck or this vehicle?
The minute I swerved out, I called 911, and when the operator had asked me where I was, I told her that I had just passed Genesee.
So on this map, if we're looking at the 163, Genesee is beyond where we are in this map, is that fair to say?
Yes.
So it was even farther north than what's depicted in exhibit number 4, is that right?
Yes.
When you say that you swerved out of the way, could you describe for us what you did?
I was in the far left lane, and when I had realized that I needed to get it out of the way, my first instinct was to look really fast in my right rearview mirror, and luckily for me there was nobody next to me, and I swerved right out of the way. And then I looked into my back mirror and realized that it was a car driving on the opposite side of the freeway.
And when you were driving, there was no other cars, what was traffic like in that area?
It was pretty quiet. I only saw one other car in front of me, but they were on the farther right lane.
You mentioned that you saw headlights and then blinking hazards.
Yes,
Did you see those when they were coming towards you or after you looked in your rearview mirror?
after.
So if you first saw this when you passed Genesee, is that right?
Yes,
And you called the police, is
Yes.
that right? Did you ever see that vehicle again?
not after that, no.
Did you continue on to your way home?
Yes.
And when you saw that vehicle, could you describe what kind of a vehicle it was?
It was a truck. At the time, I didn't know what it was, but I do know what it is now.
At the time, were you able to describe the truck or not?
It was very high, it was a lifted truck, it was a very large truck.
Were you able to give the 911 operator any color description of the vehicle?
I did tell them that it was silver. At the time, my husband was looking for an F-350, so I knew what it kind of looked like, and so that was what I told the operator I thought it was.
And when you swerved out of the way into the right-hand lane, how fast did that car pass you on the left?
I was probably going around 76, maybe a little bit more, and the other car wasn't in my lane. They were kind of in the what's it called, on the side?
On the shoulder?
Yes.
And
So
like
they
on
were
the
in
center?
between the shoulder and the lane.
So as you're driving northbound, you're in the fast lane, and there's the area to the left-hand side
Yes.
of the freeway. And sometimes it's got rougher asphalt there before there's a concrete median, is that
Yes.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And that was where the truck was passing you?
Yes.
And at any point in time, did you honk or yell or say anything?
I mean, he was already behind me. I wasn't yelling at him or honking my horn, but I was a little astonished that that was going on, and I did swear a little bit and wanted to call my husband, but I just knew I had to call 911 first.
And you did in fact call 911?
I did.
I have no further questions for this witness.
Cross. No problem.
If I approach just a minute, just briefly,
Of course.
yeah, first.
It's exhibits are up there. You're up there?
Good morning.
Morning.
That night as you were driving home, you got on the 163 from where?
From downtown area.
Okay. And on the drive home, up until the time you saw the truck, how would you describe traffic conditions in your direction of
It
traffic?
was pretty slow. There was not a lot of traffic.
Would it be fair to say there was very few cars going northbound?
I would say so, yes.
Okay. You were in the fast lane?
Correct.
We commonly call that the number 1 lane.
Okay.
Okay? So you're in the number 1 lane going north, and you see something coming at you at some point in time,
Yes.
correct? When you first saw the vehicle coming towards you, how much distance do you think there was between you and that vehicle?
Probably 50 meters.
Okay. And the vehicle you saw coming towards you was driving on the center shoulder and partially in the number 1 lane.
Correct.
Am I correct?
Correct.
The shoulder was wide enough at that point where about half the vehicle was in the shoulder, and about half was in the number 1 lane.
Yes.
Okay. You saw it, that it had emergency flashes on.
I noticed the hazards, yes.
Okay. Hazard lights.
Sure.
And is that what drew your attention to it originally?
No, his lights drove my attention.
Okay, so he had headlights on
Yes.
and hazard lights.
Yes.
When you saw the vehicle, you looked in your mirror or to your right to see if you could make a lane change,
A quick instincts, yes.
and you made a lane change.
Yes,
Right.
sir.
And you didn't come close to the vehicle when you made the lane change, am I correct?
No, sir.
It's coming towards you, but there was enough distance between you and the vehicle that you safely made the lane change.
My lane change was a quick change, yes, sir.
I understand that. You do not know how fast the vehicle was traveling.
No, sir.
You know you're going around 75, 76.
Yes.
Do you remember you talked to an officer at Clint Scales back in July of 2015?
Yes, on the phone?
And, that's right. And do you recall telling Officer Clint Scales that when you first saw the vehicle, there was about 200 meters between you and that vehicle?
I'm not the best at math and distance, so I,
So what we do know, you're going 75, 76. We don't know how fast the vehicle coming towards you is coming,
sure,
but at the time you first saw it, you had time to get out of its way.
yes.
Okay. Did you also recall telling Officer Clint Scales that you were near Genesee when you first saw the vehicle?
Yes,
Now, as you go north of the 163, there's an off-ramp for Genesee East and Genesee West.
correct,
East comes first, west comes second.
correct.
Does that refresh your memory as to exactly where you were when you first saw the vehicle?
Before then, I made the 911 call right after, and so I was just passing Genesee.
Okay, so you saw the vehicle just south of Genesee East.
Yes,
Is that a fair statement?
yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you. Nothing further.
Any redirect?
Yes, thank you, Madam. So I found when we're looking at the map, I had an opportunity to take a closer look at it here. Exhibit number 4, if you actually want to look at the screen, it might be easier. We see on the very left-hand side of the screen, we see Genesee running in a north-south direction here, Genesee. And then when it crosses over the freeway, it then is the word Birdland. And to the right of the freeway, we see kind of almost in the center of exhibit number 4, we see Rady Children's Hospital. Are you familiar with that area? So when you say that you saw the vehicle just before Genesee, it's fair to say that it wasn't actually off the map because this is kind of zoomed in a little less, but it was closer to the area where we first see the 163 marker sign just above in exhibit number 4 where it says Judson Street Condos. Is that